Hello, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the session on how to create a personalized study plan. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. With me in this webinar, we have Payal Tandon, who's the other co-founder of e-GMAT, and she's going to be your co-host today. So without much ado, let's get started. Let me start sharing my screen. All right, you should be seeing my screen right now, and so in the chat bar, if you can say yes or no, whether you can see my screen, the screen should say, "How do you create your personalized study plan?" If you can see that, please say yes. All right, let's see a few more comments here. Perfect. Thank you, guys. All right, so the goal of this session is to help you create your study plan from where you currently are to your to that score of 730, 740, or 780, or if you're aiming for a lower score, even then the principles that we'll talk about in this webinar would apply to you. So we want to make sure we help each one of you do two things. One is to create your own personalized study plan. So we're not going to give a study plan to you, but we're going to help you create your own personalized study plan. And the second thing is we want to make sure that we tell you how to study. Just having a plan doesn't guarantee that you get to that score. But if you have a plan that's personalized to your needs, and then if you study with and track metrics accordingly, you're going to find that success on the GMAT becomes a lot easier than otherwise. I also see a few questions where Kana says, hey, how do I engage in rigorous practice and not burn out with regards to too many questions? I'm sure there are a few other questions that you have as to, okay, where do I practice from? What do I practice? When do I practice? We're going to address all of these questions. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that we do in this session is we want to keep this interactive. We want to make sure that we address your concerns, and so we will actually keep this. We'll have some Q&A in this session, and because we don't have a formal polling mechanism, most of the time I'm going to keep the options on the slide itself, so you can just choose A, B, or C, because typically most poll questions have 3 options. Okay, with that, what's the agenda? We're going to really get a pulse of this group. I mean, as a group, what kind of score are you aiming for? Where are you currently? Are you facing a certain kind of difficulty? So we're going to take about 5 minutes to do that. We're going to then talk about the foundation of the GMAT. What makes that GMAT score up? Because once we have that foundation, we can then really using that foundation, engineer your study plan. Once we have that foundation, we're going to look at a foundation of learning. So we're going to look at how do we as human beings learn to excel. And then we're going to go towards your study plan. We're going to look at what's the principle that you follow when creating your study plan. And then we're going to take a case study. And then we're going to really say, hey, how can each one of you create your study plan? So overall, looking at the pace that I'm going right now, this session should be about an hour or so. But we could go 15 minutes either way based on the number of questions that I get. Okay, so let's get the pulse of this group. So what's your target GMAT score? And divided the answer into 3 groups. You can just type in A, B, and C overall. If you could put in your responses, A, B, or C. Is it 600 to 700, 710 to 730, or 740 plus? Okay, I'm getting lots and lots of C's. I am getting some A's, some B's. Okay. All right, that's great. So fairly, I mean, we have a fair representation from each group. That's wonderful. That's great. Let's get to the next poll question. How many hours have you spent preparing for the GMAT? So again, the 3 option choices, you can say A, B, and C. If A is fewer than 50 hours, B is 51 to 100, and C is more than 100 hours. And Payal, if you can just really say question 2, so that we know the poll responses are to question 2, that would help us. That way we'll be able to segment those poll responses. Okay, lots of people in the 51 to 100 hours. and a few folks who have spent more than 100 hours. So I have my other computer on the right-hand side where I can see your poll responses. Okay, that's good. So when you have this a group which is as diverse as what we have over here, we get to hear different experiences, and I think you all learn from the experiences of your fellow test takers. So the next question is a yes/no poll. Then and you just have to type in yes or no. And the question says, have you experienced a score plateau, which means, hey, you started preparing for the test, your score improved, but and if something happened that your score hit a wall, you're not able to improve beyond a certain point. And so if you've experienced an event such as this called a score plateau, then say yes, otherwise say no. Now, score plateau would happen generally if you put in more than 50 hours preparing for the GMAT. If you haven't, you probably would not have experienced that. Why? Because initially when you put time, you generally improve. All right. That is good. So a few folks have just started preparing, and then quite a few of you have actually experienced a score plateau. So we're going to really see why all of this happens. So that's where the session is not just about creating a study plan, but it's also about studying properly so that you do not experience a score plateau, so that you kind of, as you learn, your scores improve. So then let's kind of get another poll question, and this is an open-ended poll question. This is the only poll question which, or probably one of the 2 or 3 poll questions that are open-ended, which means I'd need your qualitative response. So in your mind, what does a study plan do? What's the role of a study plan? I mean, what does a study plan provide you? Again, the question is, what does a study plan do? Okay, typical timeline to study, understands your weakness. It keeps you focused, good. All right, let's get a few more responses. I have 4 responses to this question, and thank you, Pal, for putting in that question. It definitely helps me a lot. A clear way to how to utilize the time and approach the test, really good. How to manage time effectively, provides a basic framework on how to study and work towards it. So good responses. Thank you very much. So as a group, you kind of have covered a good chunk of what a study plan should do. Let's kind of look at what I think a study plan should do. So the first thing that a study plan should do is it should give you clarity as to, how would you reach your target GMAT score. Essentially, you should be able to visualize your entire GMAT preparation. You should be able to visualize that score improvement. So if you are at this point over here, you want to get to, let's say this is 600, you want to get to that 760 score, you should be able to visualize how would that go up. The various milestones to get to that 760 score should be clear in your mind. And essentially, as those milestones are put in place, let's see if I can change the color of the pen. Let's go over here. Let me get a red. So as you hit those milestones over here, you should be able to really say, hey, this is where I'm going to spend time. That's the first thing that a study plan should do. The second thing is it should give you good estimates of how much time you need for each of these journeys over here. What happens when you decide to finish something in, let's say, a week, and you realize you need a lot longer? What happens? When you say, I've allocated a week to finish number properties, and then you realize 6 days into it, you need 4 more days. You start to study quickly. You start to rush through things. When you start to rush through things, you don't learn properly, and you don't learn properly, you face issues. So a study plan should give you a reliable estimate of how much time to put in. And then, again, the direction. So where do you put in? Someone was asking, should I be spending more time on quant? Should I be spending more time on verbal? Should I start with quant, start with verbal? A study plan should tell you all of that. Okay, so we're going to address all of those questions, but let's start with the makeup of the test itself. And one thing that, as you see the the subheading over here. Your GMAT score is an ability of abilities, is what I call it, which means your score out of 800 is an ability. When you get a 760, it's 99th percentile. When you get a 700, it's 89th percentile. It's an ability. It's a comparative score. Okay, so what abilities does a GMAT measure? And I think this is something you guys know, so I'm going to go through it very quickly. Your score out of 800 is composed of, your quant and verbal scores. Those quant and verbal scores are further composed of 3 different subscores. Now, each of these 3 different subscores, the quant score and verbal score, are composed out of the score of 60, but I prefer to really look at a scale of 100 because these are percentiles. Forgive my spelling, I'm really bad with it, but essentially, I'll look at each one of them on a scale of 0 to 100 and to tell you, say, this is where I am or this is where I am. Similarly, as you go into sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension, these itself are out of 60 or out of a scale of 100. So you get a percentile score for each one of them. And I like percentile because percentile comes as a rank naturally to me, which is what each one of these are. Similarly, on the arithmetic, algebra, and geometry part over here. So remember this, your GMAT measures these 5 abilities. That's what it is. These are, for me, phony scores, and I'll tell you why. Because essentially, if you focus on these subsectional scores, you get that GMAT score. So how does the scoring work? So when you think about the GMAT, as per our estimates, your official GMAT has 5 independent engines that calculates these abilities. So these abilities that we talked about are in CR, RC, SC, arithmetic, and algebra geometry. And combining these abilities, the test calculates, of course, your quant and verbal scores, but also your GMAT score out of 800. Now, why do we say that these are independent? And there's a lot of work that has been done. The GMAT itself has never said that they are independent, but we did some analysis. GMAT Club has done some analysis, and all of that points to the fact that these are independent. So first analysis that we did was a regression test. What we did was we took about 1,000 ESRs, a lot of them from our students, also a good number of them from GMAT Club. And what we did was we plotted the GMAT score against these 5 ability scores, and we got an incredible R-square of 99%. For those of you who know regression, there are 2 things that you need to know about it. One is regression is, y is equal to ax1 plus bx2 plus cx3, where x1, x2, x3 are independent components. So the very fact that this regression is so high indicates that these components are independent, and 99% is really, really high regression. The other piece which we did was we found the standard error, which was less than 10 points out of the scale on a scale of 800, which kind of again indicated that how accurate this regression was. So that was our first evidence. The second stuff was in the year 2017, GMAT Club did this what if analysis. It was a very popular analysis that was done by Bunnell and the likes of moderators on GMAT Club, where what they did was in the old GMAT Prep, which used to give the equivalent of enhanced score report, they simulated various ways. They said, I'm going to take a verbal section, and they did the same thing on the quant section. So the results are very similar. In the quant section, they said, I'm only going to answer sentence correction questions correctly and see what percentile scores can I get on sentence correction. And they were able to hit a 96th percentile on sentence correction, but they only, despite getting 0 percentile on CR and RC. And what does this mean? This means that the test was still serving you difficult questions in SC, despite the fact that you were making mistakes in CR and RC, which means the test wasn't getting impacted. Your SC performance over here was not getting impacted by how you performed on CR and RC, which is kind of the very definition of independence. The same thing they did with CR and the same thing they did with RC. For RC, I think for some reason they were only able to get to 85th percentile. But again, you rarely see all of this points towards independence. And then there are a number of actual ESRs or real GMAT attempts. So you said this is GMAT Prep or the official GMAT mocks, as they call them. But what about real GMAT attempts? So there are a number of such ESRs that you rarely see where people have been able to get extremely high abilities in one subsection or 2 subsections, despite scoring 0 percentile in the other. Again, you can't get 87th percentile in SC if you're not served hard questions. And if you're getting served hard questions despite messing up your RC, this means that how the RC part works is very different, is independent more or less of how the SC part works. Okay. Now, why is that important? Why is that important that you understand these are independent sections? The reason why this is important is because it allows you to plan for a certain verbal score. It allows you to leverage your strengths, and it allows you to allocate time and energy towards improving and enhancing your strengths without worrying about the other subsection. And the reason why I say that it allows you to do that is because uh, if, let's say you said, hey, my strength is intense correction, but my weakness is reading comprehension, and if these were not independent, then you'd say I need to study RC really well to leverage my strength in SC, because I won't even get hard questions in SC if I don't have good RC. That is not the case. As data shows, SC and RC and CR are more or less independent. So it allows you to plan your preparation. It allows you to be way more efficient towards your preparation. Okay, this is just an illustration over here. I think we're going to take a couple of case studies to do that. So that was part 2 of the test of our agenda. So let's go to part 3, which is how do you achieve high subsectional abilities? So just from an agenda standpoint, we got the pulse of this group. We did part 1, which is hey, what does the GMAT actually test? Now we did part 2. Now we're into part 3, which is how should you study to achieve high subsectional abilities? Okay, so when you think about your GMAT at any point, let's kind of get some data over here. What's your current GMAT score? If you could type in your chat window, what is your current GMAT score? Let's get a few data points. The question is, and what is your current GMAT score? I have 640, 600, 550, 680. Okay, 640, good. So we have 550 to 480, 730, 550 to 600, really good. Perfect. So when you think about this current GMAT score, and Abhijit, if you could just put my video in there, that would also be helpful. Your GMAT score is at any point in time is composed of a map, which is like this. So let's say when you look at these two data points over here, SC and CR, and you really say this is where I currently am. Hypothetically speaking, this is where I currently am. So what do you infer from this? What do you infer from this, from these 2 data points, where you say I'm at 29 percentile in SC, I'm at 57 percentile in CR? What do you infer from this? Very simple stuff. Okay, need for improvement in SC is more than in CR. Okay, you're weak in SC as compared to CR. Good. All right, better in CR. Good. Now the other piece I want to think about is, if you were to improve in CR and versus if you were to improve in SC, are you going to study in the same manner? Are you going to focus on similar things? Of course, there are different sections, but are you going to study in the same manner? Or how would you study in SC versus how would you study in CR, based on just this data point? It's a point that you need to think about, because that's okay. You need to study harder for SC. Okay, you need more time for SC. That's another inference that you can get from it. What else? Let's get, and again, it's something that you have to think about during your preparation, because these are decisions that you make during your preparation that will determine whether you get to that 750, 760 score. Someone said they were stuck at 710, 720. This map will tell you whether you need to focus on. And again, as Payal said, what does study harder really mean? Change strategy for SC. Okay. All right, so let's kind of look into this, but this is something that I want you to think about, ponder over the next 5 minutes, because I'm going to discuss this. If you are an SC, how you're going to study to get to that 60th, 70th percentile. If you are in CR, how should you study to get to that 80th, 90th percentile? And Leslie, good response, good response. But essentially, at every point in time in your GMAT, you have a certain map, which are these percentiles. So a lot of us focus on that end score. I want you to start focusing on these percentiles, because this will give you direction as to where you need to focus on. So now I'm going to tell you, and again, we talked about this already. Now I'm going to tell you the 3 stages of learning that we as individuals go through. And at e-GMAT, we focus a lot on data. When you go through our courses on the verbal side, we give you about 400 personalized feedback points on our verbal courses, about 250 personalized feedback points on our quant courses. And having gone through the 40-odd thousand students, we've close to 20 million points of data points that we've analyzed. And what we found is that essentially all of us kind of go through 3 different stages of learning. One is when you're studying a subsection, and this is regardless of whether you're talking about number properties, word problems, PNC probability, or anything else. You've got to learn concepts and methods, and you've got to learn the concepts that are there. You've got to come up with a method that helps you solve questions. Okay. Then, once you've learned all the concepts, you've attained mastery at a conceptual level, you know how to apply those concepts, then you need to focus on mastering the methods. Okay. And then once you've mastered the methods, then you need to get towards that refinement to perfection overall. So this is a journey that all of us go through, or if you want to get to this 3rd stage over here, this is the journey that we travel through, whether you use an e-GMAT course, whether you study using a book, whether essentially you watch free videos anywhere. This is something that all of you go through explicitly or implicitly. And based on the data from these many students, what we've really recognized is, as you go through each of these stages, your percentile scores improve. So after you've learned all the concepts and methods, people are between that 50th to 60th percentile standpoint if they do it well. If you don't do it well, of course, you are at a much lower percentile point. Once you mastered the method, you are in that 70th to 80th percentile point, and then and once you've when you refine to perfection, that's when you are at 95th percentile point. Now, I want you to, this is probably the most fundamental thing that I want you to take away from this. Your approach towards each subsection is determined by where you currently are, and how you study at each stage is different. Okay, and we're going to really look at this over here. So, poll question here. So let's say you're the 29th percentile student. You've just studied the concept of subject-verb agreement. Immediately following this, what do? You have choices A, B, and C. You solve questions that test the conceptual knowledge of subject-verb agreement, and then try to solve full-length questions that primarily test that. B, you don't bother solving questions and move to the next topic. Or C, you solve official guide questions tagged as agreement, which may involve other error types as well. What would you do? What should you do if you're at that 29th percentile? A. It's clear, right? It's very logical. That's A. Okay. How many of you actually do this? When you studied subject-verb agreement, you kind of had a carefully curated set of questions which evaluated you on subject-verb agreement. How many of you did that? Again, you're talking about the 29 percentile guy. It just makes sense to do this, right? But yet, one of the things that I see people most commonly do is they say, I just started studying for the GMAT, I'm solving official guide. That's how they build their conceptual knowledge. Okay, just really important for you to understand what to do. So how do you excel in stage one? Let's kind of look at this over here. What is stage one about? Stage one is about learning and mastering concepts. Excuse me. And the thing which is really important over here is that when it comes to the GMAT, it tests many concepts together in conjunction, okay? And so you've got to really learn each of these individual concepts and learn how to apply those concepts, all right? And as I said earlier, you can reach to about 60th percentile in stage one. So how should you go about excelling in stage one to make sure that, as you put in your time, you're benefiting from it? You study a set of concepts, evaluate yourself in that set. And again, if you're studying progressively, so if you did subject verb, then you did pronouns, then you did modifiers. So evaluate yourself in that set first, and then also in conjunction with that prior set. Then solve full-length questions that primarily test the concerned concepts. So that particular set as well as the prior sets. So this is what we call as progressive learning and progressive improvement towards excellence. And then iterate over this. Do this again and again and again. Okay. And so when you think about what things are important if you want to excel in stage one, is you need that feedback at a conceptual level. Okay. And when you think about most subsections, whether it's number properties, so algebra, whether it's word problems, if you are really weak, you need at least 50 feedback points over there because of the concepts and application part of there. If you get those feedback points, if you react to those feedback points, if there's this good data that says that you've learned them, you're going to find that improvement is progressive. As you spend more time, as you master more concepts, you improve. You need access to the right kind of questions. Solving hard questions at this point is not great. Why? Because essentially, they won't give you confidence. They won't tell you that you're improving. Why? Because a mistake is a mistake, whether you solve a question up to 80% and then make a mistake, or at 20% and then make a mistake. When you make a mistake, there is no data that tells you overall as to how well you understood that particular question, to what extent. And the other piece which you really need is succinct solutions. Can anyone tell me why do you need consistent and succinct solutions? What's the importance of that when you have these 50 plus feedback points? What's the importance of that? Let's get. So the question is, what is the importance of succinct solutions when you get these feedback points at stage one? You get to know where you're going wrong. What else do you get to know? What else do you get to know? Why you're going wrong? Why you made a mistake? Because only when you understand that why is when you can correct this. Let's say you're studying verb ing modifiers. What aspect of verb ing modifiers did you make a mistake on? Why? Because that's what will tell you, okay, this is an aspect that I did not understand as well. Or if you, in what cases is an alternate cause or weakener? Okay. And that's kind of where that feedback's really important, and the solution should tell you that. One of the other things, I tell people, look at good debriefs on GMAT clubs, share GMAT experience, and what you're going to find as you read good debriefs that are appreciated quite a bit, debriefs in which people detail out their struggles, is that two things. One, the struggles are very similar. B, the journey to success is very similar, regardless of the course that people use. Each one of them will have looked at and diagnosed the areas that he or she needed to work on. Each one of them would have looked at solutions and learned from solutions. They wouldn't have solved a ton of questions. In fact, later on in this session, I'm going to share some data with you which talks about people who succeed, how many questions do they solve versus people who don't succeed. I don't like to call it failure. I like to call it you didn't succeed, because most of us have the potential to get high GMAT scores, but how many questions did they actually solve? Okay. So what mistakes do people do in stage one? First, as I talked about, when people think about learning, they solve questions to learn concepts, and that's not right when it comes to stage one. And the reason why it's not right is because you don't learn the concepts individually, you don't get feedback at that conceptual level. It's not that there's anything bad with those questions. Those questions are really high quality, but they're not suited to help you build concepts. Especially if you're talking about verbal and you're a non-native, never read most of these concepts, or if you're talking about quant and you're a native and you've been away from quite a few of these concepts. The second mistake that people do when they are in stage one is they solve hard questions or very hard questions. They say, I've got to solve hard questions. This you have to if you have to get to the 98th percentile. But if you're currently at 30th percentile, what good would solving hard questions do? Okay. The other piece which is there is people just think about the more questions I solve, the better I would get. Doesn't happen that way. Okay, it's like saying I'm not going to go to a business school. I'm just going to open businesses, because the more businesses I open, the better I'm going to get at business, without worrying about, hey, why did I fail in business one? Why did I fail in business two? And no, it doesn't happen that way. Nothing in life works that way. Practice in a proper way. Proper practice makes someone perfect, not blind practice. And then the reason why people fail is because you don't have a process. Okay, and if you've not learned the concepts, you will falter on questions, but you'd gain very little from it. The third mistake, which is actually the opposite thing, is people just watch video after video or read chapter after chapter without solving anything. I mean, I've seen students who would just say, I have finished this book. I'm going to say, how many questions did you solve? Did you do end of chapter exercises? What feedback did you get? How many feedback points? And the answer is no, I just read through the book in 2 days. When you've not gotten feedback, how do you know that you've gotten the concepts? How can you expect to hit that 90th percentile? I mean, think about what you're aiming for. And the other piece, and this is something that we see also a lot, which is kind of a derivative of three, that they focus on finishing the course. We have about 35% of our students who just do concept after concept after concept. They get feedback. They don't really care about the feedback. They'll get 50% scores at conceptual level. They say, let me just finish the next concept. I'm going to really come back to these towards the end. Even though they get feedback, they say, I've got to finish this. And they don't even take feedback into consideration. Now, a couple of questions over here, and please, yes, no answers. I'd love to get some response from you. Is this all logical? Whatever I'm saying? I mean, none of this is rocket science, right? Yet, right, this is fairly logical. When it comes to stage one, this is how we should study. This is how you'd actually have your kids study if they were going to middle school, right? Yet that's not how we study in many cases when it comes to the GMAT. And again, study properly, determine which stage you are at, and then study accordingly. This is just stage one over here. We're going to talk about stage two. And as Payal has said, have you made these mistakes? When you think about how you prepared, have you made these mistakes? Again, guys, one of the things which I say in my sessions is that, which if you actually attend sessions on the e-GMAT platform, is that when you are here in these sessions, the only mistake you can make is not participating. Why? Because if you don't participate, you don't get feedback. Whether you do things correctly, whether you solve questions correctly, or whether you, whether what you've done is just whether it makes logical sense or not, it doesn't matter. Why? Because this is practically a no-risk environment. And if you participate, you get feedback. If you get feedback, you take corrective action and you improve. The other piece, which I would request you guys to not do this, is random switching. Random switching while you are in stage one. And again, this is something that I see people do. They study SC for 3 days. They say, man, I've done enough of SC. Then let me just go and study CR. Then they study CR for 3 days. Then they move on to number properties. And then they say, I'm going to come back to SC. Again, the reason why people do this is because they say, I've gotten bored with SC. I want some variety. And I understand all of you are working professionals. It is difficult to study for the GMAT while we're working full time. But there's a reason why that 90th percentile or that 95th percentile or that 99th percentile score is elusive. It requires you to be headstrong. And when you do this, you don't get time to process information. You don't cement those concepts, and then without that, you forget those concepts. I mean, think about building a brick wall, right? You assembled half the brick wall, then you moved away. A storm comes, it's going to actually knock it off. On the other hand, if you built a brick wall, cemented it, then you left it, it's much more likely to endure a storm. That's kind of the same principle with learning. You've got to learn to a certain degree, then you can move on from one subsection to another. You won't forget things. But if you move too soon, you will. How many of you feel that? How many of you feel that? Okay, I studied SC, I was really good in SC, then I moved from SC to CR. I forgot half of what I started. How many of you feel that happened during your preparation? Let's get some responses. Okay, I don't see a whole lot of. So Payal, can you put in the question over here? Yeah, Kiyur says, yeah, I do. Okay, the question is, how many of you feel that you study one subsection and move to the other section, you say, I forgot this. And the reason why that happens is because you do that without cementing. And that's very important. Cementing is really, really important over here. Okay. Again, the whole principle over here is that without a strong foundation, and I see that there's a bit of a delay as stuff gets on YouTube live. So without a strong foundation, you can't aim for that 90th percentile. You've got to have that strong foundation. Okay, now let's go to stage 2. I'm going to focus just on stage 2. Why? Because once you get to 80th percentile, then most of the time, if you're, it comes just down to analytics, and I'd be happy to do that. But when it comes to going from stage 1 to stage 2, what should you do? What do you know? I think it's really important to know what is it that if you're getting into stage 2, what should you already know? You should know most of the concepts. You should have a methodical approach that works well for medium difficulty questions. And your ability should already have hit around that 50th percentile. Okay, that's something that getting into stage 2 over here is what needs to happen. And stage 2 is master methods, which is the stuff in dark blue. Now, what's the goal of this stage? The goal of this stage is to improve your ability, and I'll wait for that text to appear. Yeah, the goal of this stage is to improve your ability to that 80th percentile points. And the way you do that is by perfecting how you answer questions, and also data becomes really important. So when you think about this, learning, methods, perfection, we're kind of going more towards solving questions here. But it's also important to realize what's important at this stage. What should you have access to at this stage? So the first thing is you need good questions that are high quality questions that you've not seen, and you need consistent solutions. Again, feedback at this stage helps you refine. You're not changing the method. You're not learning a whole lot of new concepts. You may learn a couple of new concepts, but not a whole lot. And then the other thing that you also need is a strategic way to review this. And then, a lot of people talk about error log. Your error log should be built in stage 2 over here. Once you build that, you may build an error log in stage 1, but it becomes really, really important in stage 2. It bridges that gap from the 50th, 55th, or the 60th percentile to that 75th or 85th percentile overall. Okay, and then if you're and when we share this PDF with you, we're gonna you're going to have the link to this video as to how to cement. How do you go about approaching stage 2? So so you'd be happy to you can really take a look at this. All right. So if you want to learn how do you learn if you want to know how do you learn methods in SC, CR, and NP, we have 3 webinars this week. We have a webinar on how do you master GMAT sentence correction using meaning and logic, which is on Saturday. We have another webinar. We have a YouTube live session on Friday in which I'll talk about how do you pre-think and evaluate an assumption questions. And then we have a number properties webinar on Sunday, and Pal would be happy to share those links in the chat pod so that you guys can register for the same overall. So I think the key question which is there is how many of you learn in this manner overall. So depending on which stage you are in, you really look at, okay, am I focusing on learning the concepts? Am I focusing on cementing my methods, or am I just focused on timing? Because a lot of you really just do that based on the emails and the messages that I get. So Viplav says error logs tend to get so lengthy by second stage that you tend to avoid reviewing this. Well, I think Viplav, that's why you need. So first of all, you need an error log that's organized. That's a great point. The second thing is error log becomes more important in stage 2. Why? Because in stage 2, that's where you have the integration of concepts more and more, where a question that you're solving is testing multiple concepts, and that's when an error log tells you, hey, this is what's causing the issue. So at stage 1, when you're learning the concept, you need more conceptual feedback and method level feedback, and that's when an error log is. You can maintain that error log, but it's not going to be as useful. Why? Because it's more isolated. Stage 1, there's limited integration. Stage 2 is when the integration starts to get more when it comes to questions. So of our analysis of 40,000+ students, students, and these are all e-GMAT students. Why is it that people are unsuccessful? You can really read these. I think the one that I want to really, the 2 things that I want to talk about is, they talked about not doing stage 1 properly, but that focus on solving thousands of questions. That is, I think, the most prevalent belief that I want you guys to really not follow, or I want to dispel that. And then the other piece which is there is tricks. And people think, I'm going to learn certain tricks, I'm going to ace the GMAT. Why? Because the trick gives me a leg up. No, the GMAT is not that kind of a test. You may have studied for the CAT, you may have studied for GRE, you may have studied for SAT, and those tricks may have been useful, not on the GMAT. The GMAT is a test, is designed to predict your performance in B school. The GRE, the SAT were not designed to predict your performance in grad school. Read the history of these tests. Okay, they were designed to do other things, but not to predict your performance, and they're not good predictors of your performance. The GMAT is a very logical test. You can't beat it using tricks. So, successful students, what do? I think all of this is very logical. But the other piece, one data point that I want to make sure you understand is that successful students don't solve as many questions, number 4 over here, but rather they spend time reviewing detailed solutions. Okay. That's really important. Okay, so last month we published a research report on what causes success on the GMAT. We analyzed 300 successful and 300 unsuccessful students. Each one of these students is an e-GMAT student, and we studied about 500 data points for each student. And I'm going to just summarize some of the findings, but definitely go read this article. Payal, if you could share the link to the article in the chat window, that would be great. Otherwise, you can do it from the PDF as well. But here is something you get to really see about stage 1 of people who've done the course well. I'm going to wait for it to come over. There's a lot of data over here, but just look at the commonalities here. What you see is stage 1 when people are learning concepts and methods. You see, this is GMAT SC or e-GMAT SC course. Is just a sentence correction course over here. They get 87 feedback points over here, and each feedback point takes into account at least 5 items that they have, and it takes into account at least 30 minutes of video watching time. And so what you can really see it in an item that tests and teaches purely concepts, what is their average score across all the items, and in an item that teaches them application or practice questions, what were the average scores over there. This is stage 1. These are people who are successful. Okay. Abhijit, if you can just kind of, let's see if you can move the video, and if the annotations become faster, then I'd rather prefer that. So what you also see on the last 2 columns is how many positive feedback points they got, which means, hey, if you score higher than 80%, you get a positive feedback point. And then if you score less than 80%, you get a corrective action. We tell you, hey, you've got to improve, you've got to revise portions of this. So you fix the problem right then and there. Now, how did unsuccessful students do stage 1? And this is, again, 5 data points now of unsuccessful students overall. So look at this data. You can, the same scores over here, the same entities over here. I want you to tell me, what did you observe from these 2 data points? What are your observations with regards to successful students versus unsuccessful students? If you can type in your observations. Okay. All right, let's get to this. Always person 3 shows his or she scenario. Let's kind of look at a few more inputs here. So what do you observe? Corrective score. All right, the first thing which is there is, let's go back, I'm sorry. The first thing which is there is that people who failed, they have many more corrective actions. The second thing which you'd find is the average score in application is much lower. Okay. And forgive my bad handwriting. That's one reason and then at a conceptual level, yes, the averages are lower. Okay. Again, you can really see that there's data that tells them they're doing things wrong, yet because people are so focused on finishing things, people who fail, they don't take feedback into account. Okay. So it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve while studying, and to understand what stage of learning you are in. And this GMAT roadmap, these starting scores are really important because they define those stages of learning. So when you are in stage 1, you're learning concepts and methods. As you get towards that 60th percentile, you are in that stage of mastering methods. And when you want to get over here, you get into that refined to perfection. And then in this map at every time is very important. Hold on, I think I missed something. Okay, now this is stage 2. Let's talk about stage 2. We actually summarized stage 1 and stage 2. Successful students. Now, here's something which is very interesting over here. the first thing that I want to tell you is each of these profile names have their debriefs on GMAT Club, barring this guy who's a GC moderator. Hopefully he'll put his debrief sometime. But each of these has a debrief, so you can go read their debriefs. But what you see over here is the number of questions that they have solved is not hundreds. This guy solved hundreds of questions because he did 3 attempts. So, but other than that, most people didn't have to solve hundreds of questions in stage 2. This is stage 2, by the way. Okay. Now, look at their accuracy in easy, medium, hard over here. And this is aggregate accuracy. But the thing to notice is even someone who scores a 760 or a 770 makes mistakes in hard questions. But that guy gets pretty much all of easy and medium questions right. Now, these are aggregate average accuracies. Towards the end, each of these guys got a lot better with medium difficulty questions. So they added, you can add about 5 to 7 percentage points towards accuracy on medium overall. But you can really see that there's a distinct trend over here. And even when you hit that 90th percentile or 99th percentile, you don't have to solve every question correctly. It's just that you shouldn't make mistakes in easy and medium questions. Now, people who faltered, the first thing that you would notice is where they're faltering. In fact, in many cases, they are even faltering over here. Again, there's data which is right there in their face. This is all data from our Scholaranium platform. And, I personally, for the last 3 months, have responded to GMAT strategy emails, which is when our students write to us to really say, how do I improve? And one thing that I can tell you is our Scholaranium data is so robust, it can predict success with 98% accuracy. We have thresholds for each stage of learning over there. And the other thing that you'd notice is people who fail, they do reasonably well on easy questions. That's something which is there. But as questions get more difficult, which is when they seem to falter. 3 days ago, I was reading a forum post on GMAT Club. There was a student, I'm not going to say his name. He says, when I seem to solve questions on GMAT Club, I get really high accuracy, but I was solving these questions on Veritas Prep question bank, and I was getting low accuracy. So, and then the guy was blaming Veritas Prep's question bank. So I don't know how that question bank is, but I think one thing which is really important is what was the difficulty level of questions that you were solving on GMAT Club versus elsewhere. I mean, if you don't take that into context, without taking that into context, please don't blame a source. Because as you can really see, depending on your ability, you may be able to solve certain questions fairly easily, whereas you may struggle to solve other questions. So it's really, really important that you take things into context. Okay. So with that, let's come to the last part of this, which is where we're going to really help you create your personalized study plan with all of these insights. Now we know the fact that how the GMAT scored. We talked about those 5 abilities. We know how you should study in each stage of learning. And then let's kind of combine these things to really create your personalized study plan. Really, once you have all of this, building that personalized study plan is fairly simple. You need to define your starting abilities. You need to define your target milestones. And then you need to learn, depending on what your starting stage is, you need to personalize what you learn, how you learn. That's all there is to it. And e-GMAT students have created more than 10,000 personalized study plans using our GMAT Planner tool. But we're going to take a case study to really say how, as you build a personalized study plan, it empowers you to do the right thing, to focus the right amount of energy on each subsection. Okay. So how do you quantify your starting abilities? You take a mock test, or you take our Scholaranium quizzes, or you take the actual GMAT. I mean, the 3 ways of doing it. You need essentially your subsectional abilities. The 3 ways to get those subsectional abilities. One is you take the actual GMAT, get your ESR. It will give you your subsectional abilities. Second is take a mock test that provides that. And currently our mock test provides that. Or you practice questions of various difficulty levels from a reliable source, and you kind of do the math yourself. So when you take a Sigma X mock, it'll tell you your quant and verbal scores, but it'll also tell you your arithmetic and algebra geometry scores. It'll also, and the corresponding scores on SCCR and RC. So you can really see that over here. You can see the arithmetic ability. So the beauty of this is when you got a certain quant score, you can really say that, hey, the problem is not as much in algebra geometry, the problem's much more in arithmetic. Okay. So now it also gives you that block by block performance. So when you drill down in arithmetic, and I'm going to wait for the screen to settle down. And if for those of you who are watching this on their screen, I'm going to just see if I can zoom it in over here. Let me see. Let me see if I can escape this. Let's just get to this particular one. Let's just zoom this in over here. And the nice thing about this is it tells you how you're performing in block by block. So as you see this guy, as the questions were of medium difficulty, let's get this, as the questions were of medium difficulty, this guy answered these questions, all of those questions correctly, or most of them. As the difficulty of questions became higher towards medium hard, this guy was still able to answer these questions correctly. You can really see this is the difficulty level that is there overall. Okay. Then as questions became hard, the guy couldn't answer them. And this is despite the fact that he spent a good amount of time on answering these questions. Now, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? What would you infer from this? If I'm able to really solve medium difficulty questions, medium hard questions, but when questions become hard, I have a problem. What does that tell you? Let's get a few more responses. Does it not tell you that this guy can solve medium and medium hard questions correctly, but the only place where he needs to focus his energy on is hard questions, right? No, it's not. I mean, he could solve medium and medium hard, so his approach is there. It's just that, when it comes to hard questions, he's not able to apply it cohesively. So he doesn't need to go back and study the concepts. Rather, he needs to focus on solving hard questions, because that's the only place where he's faltering. Why? Because as you zoom out, let me just zoom out once again. Okay. As you zoom out, what you're going to really see is medium hard, the guy's doing really well, and he's not taking a crazy amount of time to solve this. So rather than going back and learning the concepts, this guy needs to focus on solving hard questions. Does that make sense? Just look at this data once again. And Aishwarya, you can't take the diagnostic from the official. You can take the diagnostic, first of all, no one's stopping you, but you won't get subsectional abilities. Okay, but does that make sense overall? Coming back to this. All right. Okay. So this is actually a real case of a guy who was at 700 and he improved to 750 in about a week. And the reason why he was able to improve in a week was because we looked at his sigma x mock, and this was while we're doing some testing on sigma x mock. And we told him, hey, you're not as weak as you think. Why? Because essentially you made mistakes over here in block 4 because you didn't spend time on it. So, but essentially the only place you need to fix yourself is you need to be able to work on hard questions. So this guy was able to go from a 700 to a 750 in about a week. Okay, but essentially, what are the key insights that you need to have? One is you need to know your subsectional abilities. The second thing you need to know is what is the difficulty of level of questions where you struggle. And then the third piece is I'm going to share this article. You can really see the insights over there. How does timing impact your performance on the test? And this gives you all of those insights. You can take a mock test here. You can read the case study over here as well. Okay. Now, you need to set milestones. How do you set your milestones? You use a tool called GMAT Planner. It uses AI to create a personalized study plan for everybody. And I'm going to show that with a case study. And then once you have those milestones, you personalize the course, depending on your starting abilities. This is as simple as that. So let's take a case study of Abby versus Chase, and we're going to go through this fairly quickly because I think we're almost at the end of our session. So again, remember, what does the study plan do? It tells you how will you reach your target GMAT score, where you're going to spend that time, and how much time do you actually need. So Payal, if you can share the URL in the chat, that would be there as well. So, but I'm going to share the PDF as well. So PDF has all the links. So the first thing is you take a Sigma X mock, and both Abby and Chase did. Abby did better in verbal than in quant. Chase, on the other hand, did much better in quant than in verbal. Now, both of them start at a score of 600. So you can see this on the top over here. Both of them are starting at that score of 600. Okay. You can see the subsectional abilities that they received. For Chase, he got 72 percentile in arithmetic and algebra geometry. Abby got 42 percentile in the same subsections, and on the verbal side, you can really see that. Now, to keep this simple, because there are so many numbers, I kept the numbers to be very, very similar, but it could be very different in your case. But again, the key thing which is there is, on the verbal side, Abby is around the 60th percentile, and Chase is around the 35th percentile. On the quant side, Abby is around the 40th percentile, and Chase is around the 70th percentile, just to make things easy. Okay. So the thing which is there is, do you think both of them need to achieve the same quant and verbal scores to get to that 740? Do you think they need to put in the same amount of effort in quant and verbal? Yes, no. And do you think they need to study the same content based on what we've learned so far? No. The answer to each one of them is no. Right? They don't need to achieve the same quant score. They don't need to put in the same amount of time, and they don't need to study the same content. And just this case study tells you the importance of a personalized study plan. Why? Because if they swap their study plans, neither one of them is going to get to that 740 score in the required amount of time. Okay, let's see whether Chase can reduce the amount of time on quant and what amount of time. So this next thing is they have to set their milestones. So they set their milestones. This is Abby's milestones. I'm going to wait for the system to synchronize. And what you see once the system synchronizes is a screenshot of GMAT Planner. What you see on the left-hand side are the scores, the starting abilities on quant and verbal. And what you see on the right-hand side are the target quant and verbal scores, as well as the target abilities. GMAT Planner does this for you. So let's see on the right-hand side, you're going to really see that the target quant abilities, the target verbal abilities, you can read the numbers. Q48, 65th percentile abilities in both arithmetic and algebra geometry. On the verbal side, you can really see 90th percentile more or less over there. Okay. Now, this is important. The next slide, I'm going to let it settle. Where does Abby spend her time? And Payal, I think you may just share the presentation link right now. You have the PDF link on Microsoft Teams over there, so they can download the presentation as well. So, so Abby starts with SC. She spends 2.1 weeks on studying sentence correction to go from that 59th percentile to that 94th percentile. Similarly, she spends about 2 weeks each to study CR and RC, and then she doesn't need to get as good as Chase needs to get to in quant. So she needs about 1.1 weeks and 1.4 weeks in quant. So that's kind of her plan. And this plan was created on 5th of October 2019. And if she puts in 20 hours per week, she can get to her target score on 11th of December 2019. That's what the system estimated. Okay. Now this is for Chase. The next slide, let's just see how Chase is going to get to that score. Now Chase, really strong in quant, is going to leverage his strengths. And we always, we never take your quant score to 51 because 50 to 51 is very fluid. So Chase needs to get to a Q50. He still needs to improve to a V40. Over there, a fairly high verbal scores. But I think now look at the amount of time that Chase needs to spend. So Chase, as who said earlier, crazy engineer said Chase can reduce the amount of time in quant, as you can rightly see, just about a week over here. Then Chase needs about 9 weeks on verbal, so 3 weeks each in SC. So that's about 50% more time than Abby needed to get to her target score. Okay, and that's really important. If you're Chase and Abby, if you're Chase and you really say, I'm going to finish and reach the 90th percentile in SC in 2 weeks, you're going to have a very different kind of pressure than what you have if you were Abby. Okay, getting the right estimate is really important. Having those realistic expectations, that's really important over here. So Chase versus Abby, when you think about it, target scores, you may say, hey, they're not very different, but a Q50 is very different from a Q48. Okay, let the system sync. A Q50, once again, is very different from a Q48. But the thing which is there is, look at the amount of time that they're spending. When it comes to verbal, Chase is spending 9 weeks, which is 1.5x the amount of time that that Abby is spending on verbal. When it comes to quant, Abby is spending twice as much time as Chase is for on quant. Okay, and that's really, really important to estimate. And knowing this is important, by the way. But that's not the biggest difference. The biggest difference is where they spend their time. And that's critical to know. Because remember, they started at very different starting percentiles. We talked about the 3 stages of learning. They're at very different stages of learning. And again, just to rehash, on the y-axis, you see the percentile points. I'll let the system sink in. On the y-axis, you see those percentile points. So you can see how our ability improves as we go through various stages of learning. Okay. Now, can you tell me, you see Abby's percentile points on the left-hand side. In sentence correction, where would Abby be spending time? You see the quadrants: learn concepts and application, master application, refine to perfection, and maintain. Where would Abby be spending time in sentence correction? Let's just focus just on sentence correction over here. Which aspect would Abby be spending time on? Which block? Master application, yes. It's fairly logical. Okay, that's where Abby would be spending a whole lot of her time on and refine to perfection. Okay. Now, that's the same thing in CR and RC. When it comes to quant, she'd start from learn concepts and methods, and then she'll have to focus her time on master application. Now, she's not looking to excel. She's only looking at that 63rd percentile, so that's where pretty much all of her time will be spent. Now, can you see how she approaches verbal? What kind of study material she looks at is very different in verbal than in quant. Can you see that? All right. Let's kind of look at Chase. Where Chase is going to spend time is very different. Chase is starting at a much lower score. So Chase, when it comes to verbal, he's got to learn the concepts, he's got to learn the methods. Same thing on SCCR and RC. And he's going to spend a good chunk of time over here. Because he needs to spend that spend time over here, he needs that additional time. Okay, and that's where he needed those 3 weeks in SC, those 3 weeks in CR, those 3 weeks in RC, or about 60 hours in SC, 60 hours in CR, or 60 hours in RC. Okay, but when it comes to the quant side of things, he's going to focus his energy just over here. Okay, because he already knows the concept, he already knows most of the application. Okay, and then again, almost towards the end of the session, so even though both Abby and Chase, are aiming for that 740 score, their path, the time required, and the components of whichever material. I mean, in this case, it says e-GMAT course, but you can use any material that are used to achieve this score. They're very, very different. Okay, and then because if you focus on the right components at the right stage of learning, you're going to find the likelihood of improvement is going to be a lot higher. With that, let's just summarize this session. Your GMAT score, remember, is composed of 5 more or less independent subsectional abilities. Each one of you goes through 3 stages of learning. Define your starting scores to figure out which stage of learning you are in a particular subsection so that you can focus on that. Students who get to those 90 percentile stage, they do those stages properly. They do not, and I reiterate, they do not solve thousands and thousands of questions. And to create your personalized study plan, you can take a Sigma X mock, it's free of charge. You can use GMAT Planner to define your target abilities, and then you need a mechanism to track your progress. With that, I've come to the end of the session. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take on any questions, but you can always write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com if you have any questions. And Payal, if you'd be happy to, if you can share the presentation, that would be great. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. You can put those questions in the chat pod. And let me give you the link to the presentation. It should come under my name. Let me just do that over here. Just share the link to the presentation. If you can download the PDF using that. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those on. And then, I'd also appreciate if you could rate the session on YouTube. That would help as well. Okay, Kana says, how would anyone refine his abilities? Okay, so refinement has 2 or 3 things to it. Good question, Kana. So one is identifying where you're weak in, and the second is doing really focused practice, and then the third thing is once you've done that really focused practice, you actually then do it with mixed practice. So how do you identify what you're weak in? Take mixed quizzes, and we can, if you write to us, we can give you or Payal, if you can really share the Wistia link for how do you define how do you do stage 3, that would be good. Okay, so step 1, take mixed quizzes, isolate, use analytics to isolate where you're weak in. Also, as you review those solutions, you're going to really figure out what's causing that weakness. And as you attend the PILE session this Saturday, or pre-thinking session this Friday, I'm going to really look at when you make a mistake, what is that habit that's causing you to make a mistake? So that helps isolate. That's step one. Step two is, do you need to do focused practice on it? That's where you need high quality set of questions in just that specific area. And then step three is, you need to make sure that, so that once you're done with step two, you're pretty much done with 80% of that improvement towards that 90th percentile. And then you need to take mixed quizzes to ensure that you can still apply it when time pressure is there, and when in the presence of noise which is created by you solving other questions. Again, you look at debriefs of people who've improved from 700 to 770. You're going to find this is a very common thing that they do. Let me see if I can share a couple of debriefs as well. Let me just see. So you look at this piece over here. Then you can also watch all of these success stories on our YouTube channel, and you can really see how these guys have improved. Okay, major question, where should we start? Step one, take a Sigma X mock. Step two, create a personalized study plan. If you go to gmatplanner.com, you can schedule a mentorship session. We do about 80 to 90 mentorship calls every week, so you can do that. So and if you're a paid student, GMAT Planner is free of charge for you. So yeah. So if you go to gmatplanner.com, just schedule one. The calendar link should tell you when the open slots are. So Ankit, does that help you? And for the refinement piece, let me also share the link to the success story piece over here, where you can look at this. And yeah. Okay, guys, if there are no other questions, then I'd be happy to end this session. Or Abhijit, you can end this session at your end. And thank you very much for joining. And if you want to take a look at our free trial, watch a few video lessons, definitely do that. Also register for the upcoming sessions.